Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, Red Circle, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Also, the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, subscribe to Off the Floor, winnow.app/Off the Floor. Text directly from myself, Brady, Greg, and Alex on stuff that's going on with the Miami Heat and around the NBA. Also, we do contests, Q&As, long posts, and much more. It's $3.05 per month. Bypass Twitter, X, Instagram, all of that, and still get your Heat news. Winnow.app/Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Our friend Lynette, you can find her at insurancebylynette.com or A Aggressive Insurance. She's got car insurance. She's got life insurance, renter's insurance, homeowner's insurance, all based in North Lauderdale area, North Broward area, but you can service anybody in South Florida. Huge Miami Heat fan. You're familiar with her from all of our streams. Go to insurancebylynette.com. Again, that's insurancebylynette.com. 2 N's and 2 T's. And now, today's episode.
Down the Biscayne. Yeah. Five on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. It's just me, Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and Five Reasons Sports. We hope that you caught Alex, myself, and Eternal on playback today. We're going to be doing more of that, so go to playback.tv/5RSN. Get all of our streaming coverage there. But today we're going on. We appreciate this guy staying up late for us. It is now, what time is it, Naveen, in the Philippines?
While we're recording this, it's 2:03 in the morning.
Just like it's 2:03 p.m. here in the United States. So 12-hour difference. Texted him about 2 hours ago, said, would like to get you on and talk about your interview with Erik Spoelstra. If you don't follow him, you should. He's at Naveen Ganglani on Twitter. Did I do okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Do it for me.
Good.
Do it for me, because we know this is a weakness of mine among many.
Okay, well, so it's at Naveen Ganglani on Twitter, ANVEENGANGLANI. So yeah, I think you actually did pretty good. And I just want to say thanks, Ethan. I feel like I've listened to like more than 100 episodes of this podcast. So to be here, it's pretty awesome. And by the way, I'm also subscribed to your Winnow app on Telegram, actually, all the way here in the Philippines. And I have to say, it's been a great investment so far.
Oh, you can come back anytime. We've done 100 episodes in just the last week. So, yes, we appreciate you listening to all of our episodes this week. You definitely should follow Naveen. Again, he's multimedia for Raptor.com. Also has a podcast called The Navs Effect. He's an events host and lots of other stuff. I've been following him for quite a while. And you're just fortunate enough that this team happens to be coming to you along with the head coach of the Miami Heat. So you took a lot of video and other things at yesterday's practice. Of course, Erik Spoelstra is an assistant on this team, a staff that also includes Steve Kerr as the head coach. I can argue that maybe Spo should have been the head coach, but maybe eventually. And then Ty Lue on the staff as well. And we did an episode about Team USA and which Team USA player manned up with the Heat eventually. I know everybody wants to say Ant. I don't know that that's the most realistic, but maybe a Jaren Jackson Jr. or Brandon Ingram in the future. But I just want you to take us through the scene of this, because Erik Spoelstra, he goes to the Philippines pretty regularly. Again, this is Mother's Heritage. He goes to the Philippines pretty regularly for camps and such. Did he go last summer? Did he go last offseason?
No, yes. Actually, I don't think he's been a while. I've been around for a while. The last time that it was really consistent almost every year was kind of like before the Big Three era, if I'm not mistaken. Unless, he's been going like without any of the fanfare, any of the media knowing, and kind of doing under the radar and like low key, which wouldn't surprise me, to be honest.
And so he goes out there. I just want to get the sense of this, because Erik, as you said, I mean, if it hasn't been that much recently, he's become a much bigger star in recent years. Since the Big Three,
yes.
Obviously, was on that stage. But now it seems to be for his own right, and there's a recognition of what kind of coach he is. And I think we've gotten away from he was carried by LeBron or Dwayne, and we started to recognize what he is. But can you put into perspective, like on the list of sports celebrities where you are, where does Spo rank?
Okay, so just to give you a brief example, when we posted the interview I did with him today, the first few comments were all local people basically saying, "Hey, Coach Po, why don't you take over the Philippine national team instead? Can you please take it over instead?" So people are basically like pleading with him to become the national head coach of the Philippines, although it seems like United States has that before the Philippines. But he is a celebrity. The ground he walks on is also really praised. Everyone knows that he's a great head coach. Everyone knows he's a great tactician. Everyone knows that at this point he's a great human being. And that speaks to the competitiveness. We have a head coach here named Tim Cohn who worked as an assistant coach for the Miami Heat in the Summer League
Mm-hmm.
2022.
Mm-hmm.
And Coach Tim is a 25-time champion, and he has a great relationship with Spoelstra. And every time Coach Tim is around, people also want to know about Coach Erik Spoelstra. What does it like, being with Spo, working with Spo? And I think the reason why that is, Ethan, is because Spo is so open about embracing his Filipino heritage. He never shies away from talking about how proud he is of his mom's roots, how proud he is of wearing the Philippine flag on his chest, not literally, but figuratively, how proud he is of wanting to know more about the Philippines. Coach Tim, when I did an interview with him a few months ago, he said every time he meets up with Spo is always trying to get information about what's the Philippines like economically, the politics, the government, how's it going, the basketball scene, the people, all of that. So the fact that he loves being a Filipino, that he expresses it as well, that he's not shy to talk about in interviews or when people ask him about it. I think that adds to the allure on top of everything else he's accomplished in the basketball court, and leading the Heat to NBA Finals in the last 4 years, and Eastern Conference Finals in Game 7, where they could have made the NBA Finals again too. I think that adds to it because even here in the Philippines, a lot of people in those big 3 days thought, okay, he has LeBron, he has Wade, he has Bosh, he has Miller, Allen, all these guys, Mario Chalmers. So he's kind of just a coach coaching a great team. But since then, he's proven that he's the elite of the elite. And people are starting to recognize that. People are starting to respect that. And like I said, people wish he would coach the Philippine national team.
Yeah, and again, he's a pretty busy guy. It's interesting when you get to know Erik a little bit. Like, he is inquisitive about a bunch of different things, and sometimes I wonder how he keeps it all straight. Because I've said this to our co-host. Like, sometimes you'll ask Spoelstra a question, and then like he'll come back with an answer 2 weeks later. I've had this experience with him numerous times. I got something wrong in a question that I asked him during the finals about who he told to stop shooting during the Big Three era. It was actually Shane Battier. It wasn't Mike Miller, and it wasn't quite the way that I put it. And he literally, like a week later, we'd already changed venues. Like, we were back in Miami, not in Denver. He stopped me on the court after I was talking to Miller, and he says, you got that thing wrong, right? Like, I mean, it's he has this kind of ability to process all this kind of different information and compartmentalize it. And sometimes I don't know how he has the time for any of it, frankly. But yes, he has always expressed interest in what's going on in his mother's heritage country. I want to get to his interactions before we get to your interview, his interactions with this particular group, because I know Heat fans are always like, okay, if you get somebody on Team USA and they get to know what quote unquote Heat culture is about, whether it's Bam Adebayo sort of winning over Dame Lillard when they were together and then becoming close friends, or even way back where Dwayne, was sitting on the back of a bus, in 2008 with LeBron and Bosh, and they started to discuss, according to legend, of course, that, what might happen in 2010. But now you actually have like the keeper of Heat culture on the sideline there with these guys. And a lot of these players are signed for the next 2-3 years. They're franchise type players. Halliburton just got paid an insane amount of money. Brunson's, obviously signed with the Knicks last year and got a contract. I don't think Minnesota's going to want to part with Anthony Edwards anytime soon, or they shouldn't. But what do you just notice about sort of the interactions of the players with Spo? Does they look loose with him? Do they look comfortable with him? Like, what does that look like?
Well, they're very comfortable and very loose. And I think they appreciate him not just because of his basketball mind, but also his ability to connect with human beings as well. And I feel that's something that he's really gotten better at since the Big 3 days. That's not to say that he wasn't able to connect with his team during the days of the Big 3, but it feels like after that, those years where it was Rook 1 and Rook 2 leading the way, or the years where Jimmy and Bam lead the way, he just has this like chemistry now with these guys, almost like they're always in sync, that I think just came with age and experience. And you're starting to feel that sense too with the Team USA guys. So Ethan, interestingly enough, and I'm gonna get to the Anthony Edwards point in a bit, but interestingly enough, the camp that Spoelstra had, so Wednesday morning Manila, was not exactly mandatory for the USA basketball players to attend. Basically, what I was told by a friend of mine who works with USA basketball was it was an event where the players, if they wanted to, they could go. And by the way, the camp started relatively early, I guess, like 9:30, 10 in the morning. And considering that USA got in Manila just the day before, they could have been tired. They could have chosen not to go. But some of them did go. And I was curious about that. Like, who would choose to go? And at the same time, who would also interact with Spoelstra in the process? So Steve Kerr was also in attendance, so kudos to him. He was talking to the campers as well, some of the members of the media. He was very kind. Mikhail Bridges was there. Cam Johnson was there. Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart came a little later towards the end of the camp. Um, let's see, from Anthony Edwards was there too, but before him, I believe that Tyrese Halliburton was there as well. So Halliburton and Bridges were the first two guys to attend. So when Edwards attended, or rather arrived, I guess he was trying to be anonymous because he had his hoodie on top of his head, looked very chill, passed by, and he was staying on the other side of the playing court. Now, who knows if I'm maybe reading too much into this, or maybe I just like to speculate a little bit, but he was staying on the other side of the court while the campers, the coaches, the players were nearer to the benches where the media were, and the other players were waiting for their turn for drills. So Edwards was kind of by the door, other side of the court, just chilling. And unsurprisingly, Spoelstra, while conducting his camp, walks over to the other side of the court. And for a good few minutes, about like 8 to 10 minutes, he was just there talking it up with Ant. And they were just like, it looked like it was so natural. It looked like they've been together for years, I actually took a
he's
picture of
coached
that.
a couple guys like him, I guess.
Yes.
I mean,
He actually had an interview with CNN today where he mentioned Edwards is the closest thing he's seen to Dwayne Wade. So
right.
that's really the highest compliment spoken, give anyone considering his relationship with Dwayne, right? But at the same time, too, I think the relationship has gotten really good between Edwards and Spo, because later Wednesday evening when we got to attend the final minutes of USA practice, at that point they're done with practice. They're kind of having these little games. I'm not sure if you've seen the video yet in the tweet, but basically being there, the story was Spoelstra and Edwards had this bet going on where Edward would have two chances to hit a half court shot. And I'm not sure how much exactly was on the line. Edward said it was for a huncho. Not so familiar with that, but I'm guessing maybe some kind of value, basically. And they were trash talking each other a little bit too, because so Edwards makes a second half court shot, and then he basically tells Spoelstra, "Hey, I want my money, and not in USD. I want it in pesos to kind of, which is the local Philippine currency, to kind of mess around with him a little bit." And Spoelstra's like, "Okay, let's go back at it tomorrow. Let's go at this again." And Edwards basically says, "Oh, you want to go at it again tomorrow? You a bold bleep." So, the bleep, you can kind of figure what he said from there. But it was all in like jest. It was all for fun. And just how quickly those two have built a relationship. And during my interview with Spoto, he mentioned about what Edwards means to the team. And he said something interesting, which I thought was another high compliment, which was he said, Anthony Edwards just knows how to captivate a crowd. And this is a guy in Spoelstra who's coached many superstars who have captivated crowds before. Jimmy, LeBron, Wade. Maybe, I guess you could put Shaq in that list as well. And for him to kind of look at Edwards in that regard already at this young age just says a lot about the respect that's building between the two. And you can see it on the court when they're spending time with each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think in 3 years we may look back at this little flirting escapade here in the Philippines and say, "Wait a second, that's where it started." You mentioned Dwayne. I mean, I think that Anthony Edwards, and you don't want to put too much on a young guy who still needs to get out of the first round, and I think that has more to do with the pieces they put around him, and they need to pivot to make him the clear number one guy, which is I think they want to do, but they can't figure out what to do with Towns. Or Gobert at this stage. But I think when we look at it, I mean, he is in a lot of ways, Anthony Edwards, a combination of Dwayne Wade and Jimmy Butler in terms of mentality, coming from Minnesota, his willingness to just say whatever the hell's on his mind,
Yeah.
which is very Jimmy-like.
Athleticism.
Yes, and the
Young Dwayne.
And the Dwayne quality, I think from a playing style standpoint, there's a lot there. And Anthony Edwards has said that himself. So it's interesting that he's used Bandu. But I think what's really has struck me about this USA team, and I know there was criticism that they didn't have huge stars on it. It seems like a lot of nice guys. Like it seems like a lot of guys that Spo would relate to. Like Halliburton has a very positive media presence. Brunson has a very positive media presence. Mikal Bridges is one of the nicest people in the entire league. I mean, you look at this group, it just seems like kind of a likable group. Like there have been some USA teams that have not necessarily been the case. I covered Dwayne's first in 2004, and there were some issues on that group. This does not seem like it, and it just seems like the kind of group where Erik Spoelstra is going to come back with a lot of positive thoughts about players on this team. And I think as he elevates in the Heat organization, which clearly is going to continue to happen, especially when eventually Pat moves aside, his reports on these guys are going to be pretty damn good. And I don't just mean from a basketball standpoint. I mean from a personality standpoint. I want to get to your interview specifically with Spo here in a second. Before I do, I want to mention a couple sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Prize Picks, that's our fantasy sponsor. And yes, they will have the FIBA games on there. So go to prizepicks.com or the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store. Use that code 5, F-I-V-E. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. And Better Edge, use the code 5RSN, get $20 to play. This is our legal betting partner, legal in 45 states, including the state of Florida. But also, I'm actually going to be launching it here over the next few hours. We're doing a contest on there. You don't even need to pay for this. It's free. And you can win a $150 piece of memorabilia. It's a framed art of the 1992 Dream Team, or at least the 3 core members, Larry, Michael, and Magic. So we're giving that away. It's $150 value. And we're going to be giving that away for just entering and answering 8 questions and a tiebreaker about this FIBA tournament. Also, we're going to be doing FIBA on playback. Join us at 7 a.m. on Saturday. Yes, we'll be up 7 a.m. for Nikola Jovic playing for Serbia, and then the U.S. plays about 40 minutes after, and we will pivot to that. All right, we're back here with Naveen. Again, follow his work on Twitter and elsewhere. All right, so take me through it. You had a little time with Spo. What did you get out of it?
Well, once again, the passion for the Philippines. What he said, interestingly enough, though, was how growing up, there was a lot of the Filipino values in his home, which he still takes with him until today. And I'm not sure if it's fair to say this because, about the whole undrafted concept where he discussed not exactly wanting that word to be used to describe these players. But I think underdogs is a great way to describe the Miami Heat teams over the past few years, where we've really seen Spo's imprint on the team more than ever before. And that resonates a lot with the Philippine mindset of being underdogs as well, not just in basketball, but really in a lot of aspects of life. Now, sometimes it's a little too overly romanticized when you talk about the life concept of it, but a lot of Filipinos, I think, can resonate with being called underdogs because of the hardships they go through every day. And that's not to say that Spo is an underdog in that sense, but I think he carries himself as an underdog, always trying to prove himself. That's why he's always willing to do the grunt work. Another point that was brought up, just a random trivia here for your Philippine listeners, was that Spo mentioned how Dwayne Wade said that he wants to come to the Philippines soon too. In fact, Dwayne Wade told Spo this just right before, a few days before he entered the Hall of Fame sometime this summer. So Philippine fans, that's something to look forward to. And wait, let me read the quote here because I tweeted it out. I wanted to read it word for word because I think this is very important. And again, this goes back to Anthony Edwards. So Spo says during the interview on Anthony Edwards, he does have a great work ethic. He has a competitive toughness. He has a world-class talent, but he's also willing to be part of a team, sacrifice, and play a role in the team. He's a fun guy to be around, just really enjoys the moment and plays his best when it's needed the most. He can captivate a crowd like few can. The fans in Manila are going to be able to experience that in the next 3 weeks. So I think, again, that speaks highly of Edwards. And he also spoke highly of the rest of the team. There's just such a level of excitement about coaching this squad with Halliburton and Bridges. And like you mentioned, just all good guys willing to ball. During a moment earlier, Halliburton and Bridges were hanging out talking, and they could be talking about anything at this point, right? They could be talking about how hot the weather is in Manila, or how bad the traffic is, or how long the flights were. Instead, they were talking about basketball, talking about some kind of pass to make, some kind of layup to attempt when you're driving in the rim. So there's a lot of hoop stock and like just genuine basketball conversations going on, and you can see why that would appease Spoelstra so much, because that's what he loves to do. And the coaching staff he's with too, Steve Kerr, Ty Lue, Chip Englund, and the rest of the guys around him, I think this is the kind of crew that he just loves to have around, and that just really shows when he answered these questions that I asked him earlier.
We appreciate it, Naveen. Yeah, and I think you'll see things this year from Spoelstra that he picks up from these guys. We know he studies other coaches. There's a lot to be. I know that some are not a fan of some things that Steve Kerr does, but certainly in the motion offense stuff that he does and the way he runs his team. Ty Lue has been, I think Ty Lue has become a better coach since he left Cleveland. Actually, Ty's very good at making do with less. Which is one of the things that Spo does. And Chip Englund, I mean, just to have him around, I think is terrific. Mm-hmm. Obviously, one of the great shooting coaches of all time. And Spo will take some stuff from him. But I really, at first I looked at the list of players on this team. I was like, okay, I don't know. I'm going to get into this. But this is a pure basketball group, and it's a young basketball group. And I actually think it's the right group for the country to get behind here a little bit. There are no prima donnas on this team. And I think they're, I hope that they go far. I mean, France, Australia, before we let you go, where do you have them? Like if I was to say your top three in this tournament, what would they be?
I think USA is still number one at this point, just because of how loaded the roster is. And after seeing how Ant took over the game against Germany the other day late in the fourth quarter, where he could just really get explosive and go off for like 8 points. And you have the Halliburton, Reeves unit coming off the bench, that unit being led by those two guys, and how quickly they can turn the pace of the game. I think there's going to be a struggle, maybe in a tight game situation against like a France or Slovenia, in terms of, okay, who's going to take the shot? Obviously, Edwards is the best choice, but if Edwards is double team, triple team, like, can someone else, step up to the plate and take over? Can someone else lead things? I guess Brunson would be another good option, but there have been times where they've played good without Brunson on the court, with Halliburton and Reeves inside there instead. So I think that's going to be interesting decisions. So one thing Steve Kerr mentioned, actually, and just to answer your last question too, I think the other two teams to look out for are France and Canada. I think France is pretty loaded. Canada, because they have Shea, I think that's going to be very exciting to look at. Slovenia would have number 4 right behind them. I'm interested to see how Dominican Republic does with Cat in the roster. But back to the point. So Steve Kerr actually said for each of their upcoming games in the first group phase, New Zealand, Greece, I'm forgetting the last team, I'll have to double check. Each of his assistant coaches are going to come up with game plans. He didn't say who for which game. So Ty Lue is going to have a game plan for one game. Spoelstra is going to have a game plan for one game. So he's really letting his assistants help scout and determine what they do. And he's kind of playing the role of just keeping everything together. And I think there's such a good chemistry with the team. They're going to be tested. I think they might lose one game in the group phase, but I think ultimately they're going to go all the way and win that gold medal.
I wonder if Canada had Jamal Murray, what that would look like, because they were a sleeper coming into this. But if they had Jamal with Shea, with the way RJ's playing right now, little thin up front. But I mean, we love KO, but little thin up front. But they had an interesting mix. I think without Jamal, it's gonna be a little bit more of a struggle. We know Fournier plays different in these tournaments, and you still have Rudy. For what it's worth, he can't be played off the floor quite as easy in international competition as he can in the NBA. But I think that I'm with you. I think the USA probably drops one on the way and everybody panics. But I think what we're seeing is, we're going to see the profiles of particularly Brunson's kind of there because he's in New York, but I think the profiles of Edwards, Halliburton, Reeves is there obviously because he's a unicorn of sorts and he's a Laker. But I think we're going to see some of these guys. Jaren Jackson Jr. is another one who, I think his profile is going to increase. And I do agree with you. I think ultimately they win. And I think this is a good experience for Erik. And look, I think whenever the Heat put their best foot forward and they put their best people out there, that people generally gravitate towards them and to the organization. And as Erik takes a bigger role, I think this is really good for him. Well, Naveen, we appreciate it. You should follow Go ahead, Naveen.
Ethan, can I just add like a few more Spoelstra stuff that I
Yeah,
think
go ahead.
the Heat fans would be interested? So tier USA points one, I've noticed Austin Reeves is pretty popular with the rest of the guys, and I think he's earned his spot in the team just because of how hard he's played and how he meshes with the rest of the guys. But back to the Spoelstra part, I'm not sure if you know this. You probably do. Years covering him. So there was a quick Q&A part with the campers and the kids after the camp earlier. And so he was talking a little bit about the big 3 days, how happy he was to see Ray, Chris, Dwayne get into the Hall of Fame, how he kind of indicated how he's excited to see LeBron eventually get in there as well too, without saying it out loud. But that was kind of the vibe I was getting from reading between the lines. And he mentioned how he prepares himself mentally for games. He admitted, and this was something I found rather interesting because I don't think I heard him say this before. He admitted that he actually has dealt with anxiety in preparation. And he said he had two ways that he deals with it. One was meditation. He mentioned downloading apps on the iPhones or on anyone's phone, and really using those apps to prepare meditation and get ready mentally to relax. But another thing he does every night is he has a gratitude journal. So every night after the day is done, after his work is done, he mentioned this to the young kids. He gets his gratitude journal and he writes down things that he's happy about, things he's thankful for. And that kind of keeps him to his center, keeps him grounded. And right before my interview with him started, I was so curious about it. So I asked it because I told him, Coach Bo, I get so drawn into my work that sometimes I forget about the outside world totally. And I feel like with you and coaching, all the way back to when you were in the video room, you were like this as well. And he was like, yeah. But then, having the gratitude journal kind of helped change things for him. So I just found that so interesting and something that could help people out there beyond just basketball, coming from quite the leader that Spoelstra is.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And I haven't heard him talk about that specifically before. I know he's given out books. He believes in, the self-help kind of category of the bookstore is something that he goes to. He's given out books to his players before. But when you mentioned the meditation, that kind of brings this to mind is I just remember during the Big Three era where, there would be these pictures of him sitting on the bench, right? Everything, all this stuff going on around him. Big Three Heat would be in a hostile environment, really hostile environment during the playoffs or something. And LeBron would be going out and all this, and Spo would just be sitting there on a chair, just looking straight ahead, like at no one, but sort of lost in thought. And I think at the time there was criticism of it because it's like, it looks like the role's too big for him, but that's just the way he handled it. It was just the way he had the swirl around him and the noise and all that. We've seen him get much more comfortable in his own skin as time's gone on. And I think that you made a good point here earlier on, which was that, I don't think that he was the greatest communicator during the Big Three era. That was one of the issues. He had David Fizdale for that. Fizz was the guy who was kind of the Big Three liaison. When Chris and Dwayne and LeBron had a problem, they went to Fizz, who then brought it to Spo. Over the years, I think Spo's level of communication, particularly with the back end of his roster, has improved immeasurably. Players used to complain about whether they were in or out of the rotation. You don't really hear that anymore. I think there's much more of a communication level with him, with Chris Quinn, with others on the coaching staff, with the players to kind of let them know what the expectations are, what the roles are. And that's allowed them to take on some projects. And I think that is, we just did a playback on Christian Wood, and I look at a player like that and I'm like, okay, that really hasn't worked in the last couple situations, but maybe now with Spo it could. And I think that gives them kind of a different level of comfort as they go forward. Well, Naveen, we got to go, but I appreciate you taking the time, staying up late, 2:30 a.m. as we close this thing. Get some sleep. Everybody follow Naveen's work, not just when the Heat are in the Philippines, but he does an excellent job throughout during the season. We all follow you here at 5 Reasons Sports. And again, we appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ethan. Yeah, I've been following you guys for years. You guys are doing a great job covering the Heat. Always looking forward to your pods after each game. And I'm sure you guys are only going to get better as the years pass by. It's been a thrill being here with you, and I hope to be back in the future if you guys will have me.
We'll get better as soon as Brady takes over the hosting duties. Have a good night, Naveen.
You too.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.